And we're going live.
You are live.
I know that, but hopefully this meeting is live. Okay, I'd like to call to order the City of Sumner Council Study Session. The date is February the 8th and the time is 6 p.m. Reminder to everyone out there, as we've been doing for the last year, the City Hall remains closed due to the Governor Inslee's Healthy Washington Recovery Roadmap order, consequence of the COVID-19 pandemic, and the public has been invited to attend the meeting virtually by using the Zoom link that has been on our website and also on the council agenda. So I would note that all council members are present. Appreciate that. Like I said, we have one item on our agenda under regular business, and that's the 2020 comprehensive plan update. And Mr. Wilson, do I call on you or turn it over to Mr. Windisch?
We can go straight to Mr. Windisch tonight, Mayor.
Mr. Windisch, you're on.
Thank you, Mayor, members of City Council. Tonight is a one item meeting, but it is a lot of information. Ann Siegenthal, our associate planner, has been working on this 2020 comprehensive plan update, I think for most of 2020, while we were and have been on quarantine and away from, well, not quarantine, but isolating away from the office. And it is a lot of material. If you've had a chance, and I hope you have, to review the packet, there is a ton of material. Ann's tried to put together documents to kind of give overview and like what to read first and that kind of thing. But there is still an enormous amount of material that she's been working with over the last year, and the Planning Commission has been reviewing it. And we've also done our very best to engage the public during a pandemic, not necessarily easy, but as you will find, there are some statistics related to our Sumner Connects website that are very encouraging. A lot of people have taken a look at the website and engaged, meaning they've gone more than just a click or two into those websites. So I'm excited about that. And I don't want to delay this any longer, so I'm going to turn it over to Ann, and Ann has a presentation and of course a study session, so feel free to ask questions as we go through. Ann, it's all yours.
Sorry about that. Good evening, Mayor Pugh and councilors. Nice to see you all. I do have a PowerPoint slideshow for you, and feel free to stop me at any time. This is going to be an overview of what types of documents you have in your packet, and hopefully you get a sense of their relative importance, how they relate to each other. So feel free to stop me though if you have questions as I go through these slides. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Mr. Steffens, will you allow me to do that? Or Mr. Wilson, I think I can.
You should be allowed.
Do you see?
Thanks, Ann. It's up there for slide number 1.
Okay, great. So here we are already, February 8th, 2021. As a quick refresher for all of us, so why are we doing this? What is the comprehensive plan? Well, the comprehensive plan is really our roadmap, the community's roadmap to the future. Contains our policies related to land use and housing, transportation, capital facilities, and so on. And it has a number of goals and policies, some of which we are updating on this round. And we're able to do that because every 1 to 2 years, the state allows cities to update their comprehensive plan. And so we were due for that. We had some requests for some map amendments and some zoning text amendments. So there's what brings us to today. And the comp plan also includes a map of land uses and where land use designations are allowed around the city. And as part of this also, we're updating the zoning map and the zoning regulations that implement the comprehensive plan. A quick word about where we are, kind of the history. So we've been working at this for a while, since January 2020, when we opened up the comprehensive plan to applications for changes. And then we've had some rounds with the Planning Commission and reviews with them. We had several study sessions throughout the summer and fall. And then in December 2020, we had a Planning Commission public hearing. And we did receive a few comments. I believe we received 6 comment letters and I believe a 7th comment at the public hearing. And we can talk more about those comments as well if you like. And then in January, the Planning Commission made their recommendations to the City Council. So here we are at the City Council study session in February. And what we're hoping to do is go to a public hearing later this month, hopefully the 16th of February. And then we're hoping that we can get approval and adoption by the council in March of 2021. And for all of you, if you need more information on some of the history of our projects, we've been making use of Sumner Connects quite a bit on this project. And as Ryan mentioned, we've had really quite a good response. We have an East Sumner neighborhood plan webpage, and we also have a comprehensive plan webpage. So we've had a lot of people looking at those. So speaking of that, in terms of public outreach, we've had a long series of efforts to let the public know what we're working on. Back in 2019, we started to float this concept of the East Sumner neighborhood plan change in the central neighborhood. In April 2020, we had a virtual open house. Of course, we were in the middle of the pandemic at that point. So that was a virtual open house. In May and June, we sent letters to the East Sumner property owners, talking to them about wetlands and wetland studies. In July, we had an online survey for East Sumner that we had on Sumner Connects, and we sent a postcard out to all the property owners in East Sumner. There are actually about 150 property owners within that East Sumner boundary. So we alerted them, invited them to go to Sumner Connects and take our online survey. And here are just a couple of statistics about what we've seen on Sumner Connects. For the 2 project pages, the comprehensive plan and the East Sumner neighborhood, we've had 154 what they call engaged participants. So that's somebody, they took our survey, they asked a question, so they were actually participating online. And then we had 457 people so far that have actually been clicking around in the websites and viewing things. So that was encouraging to see that kind of participation. Then in July of 2020, we sent out notices of the rezone proposals, and I'll talk about that in a minute. We have several parcels that were proposed for rezones by private property owners. And so we sent out notices of those and posted sites with our big public notice signs. We also mailed out our city newsletter to everyone in the city, to all households. We had some information about the comprehensive plan update in that. We held our second virtual open house in October. And we had Ryan actually put together a couple of nice videos that are really fun to watch. So those are posted on Sumner Connects, and we had people looking at those. And then in November, we posted and mailed a notice of the availability of a series of environmental documents, such as the environmental impact statement. So we wanted to let people know that those environmental documents were available for their review. And that was a 30-day public comment period. And then finally, kind of bringing us up to this point, before the Planning Commission hearing, we posted and mailed a notice of the public hearing with the Planning Commission. And that went out to all our usual email lists, and also a postcard mailed individually to all the East Sumner Plan owners and agencies. So any questions so far on that? So as Ryan mentioned, this is a really quite a bit of material. It's a really comprehensive package, and unfortunately, it is that way. There's no way of getting around that, given the types of state requirements we have to meet, the zoning and map change requests we had, and the regulations that we wanted to update, because we haven't done this for a while. So I'll go through this overview of the various components of your packet, and then I'll go into each of these in a little more detail. So the first part of this is we have individual property owner and staff proposals, such as a Houston Road area map change. We have some CBD parcels down on Main Street that we're updating their zoning. The school district asked for a map change on their parcels. We have a business owner who proposed new coffee roasting regulations in the town center. And another proposal is from staff to add an innovation district to our comprehensive plan and our zoning code. And then we have a number of miscellaneous housekeeping updates as well. And I can come back to this. This map represents the actual physical sites that are being proposed for map changes. The school district parcels, the Houston Road parcels, more school district parcels at the Eli Hill site, and then a couple parcels down along Main Street that are being rezoned to neighborhood commercial. And then we'll talk more about the East Sumner Plan zoning update and what that looks like. So in addition to the map changes and these individual requests, we also are updating our critical areas of regulations. We refer to those as our wetland regulations, but they include streams and steep slopes. We're really looking more at wetlands on this because of the East Sumner Neighborhood Plan update and the effect of what we're proposing on those wetlands in the central neighborhood. We're also updating our East Sumner Neighborhood Plan. We are including a new updated, I should say updated, not new, East Sumner Planned Action Ordinance. And we have the environmental impact statement. Right now it's a draft environmental impact statement. And then we'll have a number of ordinances that are actually going to be adopting all of these changes. The changes will all be bundled up into these various ordinances. So I'll go through each of these proposals. You've probably seen this before. We did look at these, I think, back in May or June of 2020, after the Planning Commission approved the list of items for consideration. So the Houston, we call it the Houston Road parcels. This is the old cannery. And so this area encompasses several parcels. It's a 7-acre site. Wayne's Roofing is here. There's some industrial buildings. And the proposal is to change that area from general commercial map designation to light industrial. And along with that, we'll have, we propose, and we worked through this with the applicant, we're proposing some updates to our light industrial regulations to make those a little more flexible for contractor yards and some of the light industrial uses that we might find in this area. So that's one of the proposals. And we call these the CBD commercial parcels on Main Street. They're 4 sites with several parcels. They're right now, each of these sites is zoned Central Business District. However, what's happened with the Central Business District is that was absorbed mostly by the Town Center Plan when that was adopted. And so these were, and here is the Town Center Plan boundary in yellow here. So you can see that these parcels weren't included in the Town Center Plan, and we really don't have any Central Business District zoning anywhere else. So this is really more of a code cleanup in staff's perspective. So what we wanted to do was change these parcels to the next closest zoning and map designation, which would be neighborhood commercial. It's very similar to the Central Business District. And then
and just to stop you, Councilmember Newman has a question or comment.
Sure.
Yeah, sorry, thank you. Who owns those properties now?
These are all privately owned. There's several established businesses along here. I'm going to get this wrong. There's Artisan Solutions. There's a funeral home. Gosh, and then this is these are all privately owned. There's one owner.
One
Yeah.
owner for all?
No, they're different owners for these different parcels.
Okay.
So yeah, they each have different, and we send out notices to those. I did speak with one business owner who had questions about signs and whether or not their signs might be affected by this change to neighborhood commercial. And we actually went through that, staff went through that line by line, and there's really no impact on the businesses in terms of their sign codes.
And what's the adjacent zoning to that, like both, like immediately to the south, east, and west?
This is all general commercial. There are some pockets of low density residential in here, but this is mostly all general commercial. So this is T-Mobile and McDonald's. There's, I think, some low density residential in here. And I could pull up a zoning map for you in a couple minutes if you want to look at that further.
I can look at it later. Thank you.
But these are all
Is there-
commercial.
Yeah, is the question, Charlotte, because I see this is going to neighborhood commercial zoning. Is that zoning consistent with the adjacent commercial uses? Is that the question?
Yeah, that's part of it. And then part of the answer led me to as well, look later, whether it doesn't make sense to, I'm not sure that low density residential should be right in the middle of all of this. It's possible that it makes sense to upzone that low density residential. I mean, just for consistency's sake and for compatible uses. I mean, normally I think you see low density residential on more of the outskirts rather than central downtown.
Yeah,
Like if we are going to be actually comprehensive about it.
yeah. Let me provide a little more context for that. We're not increasing the commercial intensity of these uses. We're making those the zoning of those uses consistent with the commercial uses that are there. So they've been commercial businesses, the very same businesses that are there pretty much for years. And so we're not intensifying the density, or excuse me, intensity of commercial uses. And we're not moving that line that the council has established long ago for where commercial ends and where low density residential stops. So this really maintains pretty much the status quo.
Sure. And I understand and appreciate that. I was more wondering about making sure that we aren't just targeting places where it makes sense, but making sure that we are adjusting everything else to be consistent with that as well. Anyway, but we can talk another time. Anyway, the answer was great. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, and let me know if I can provide more information on that and look at the zoning. I also know that the people who live in those low density residential areas so far, from what I've heard, do not want that to be zoned commercial, even if it's our lowest intensity commercial zone. So
I
there's
was suggesting that kind of belief. Yeah.
Okay, good. All right. Thank you for those questions. School district parcels downtown. These are the parcels up on Mason Street that would become, and this is the Eli Hill site. And these are, and this is one that's zoned CBD, by the way, that would change to an underlying neighborhood commercial. But the overall map designation in the comprehensive plan for these would become public-private utilities facilities. That's an existing designation that we will see a lot of times on city properties and substations, that kind of thing. So the school district requested that that our city maps reflect what the actual uses and functions are. So this will become part of the high school, and then this has become another school facility. And then just as a cleanup measure, what we usually do when there's a zone like a public facilities type of zone, or excuse me, type of designation, we make sure that the zoning map, underlying zoning map, has a zoning designation that's consistent with the surrounding parcels. So these will go to an underlying zoning of low density residential, like the school. And this will become, the Eli Hill school site will become neighborhood commercial, just like these parcels along here we were just speaking of. And then this little parcel on the south is actually part of the Eli Hill site, but we're going to maintain that as a low density residential zoning, which it is currently. And the school district is fine with that. And that's an example of where we're trying to balance holding that line between commercial development and the low density residential areas that are back off of Main Street.
And go ahead, Charlotte.
Sorry, but okay, what's the zoning for the other side of Mason Street?
Up above,
Yeah.
I think that is all medium density residential.
Okay, and then remind me again, okay, so we are changing that southern part of Mason. Was it did you say neighborhood commercial?
I'm going to, yeah, the southern part of, I'm going to back up here a little bit, so bear with me. I'm going to make you a little car sick. You're driving around, but you were concerned about zoning, so if I may, I'll just try to pull that up really quickly for you.
And I'm sorry, and I don't recall what the zoning was when the school initially purchased it.
So it was medium density residential originally. And so all of this area up here is medium density residential. This is currently medium density residential. And so this will go to, the school itself is low density residential. So this will become have a map designation of public facilities, while the underlying zone will match the school. And
Okay.
then on the Eli Hill site, this is currently central business districts and central business district. And then this little parcel on the end is low density residential. So these will change from central business district to neighborhood commercial. This one, because of the desire in the past that the council has expressed about kind of holding that line between commercial and low density residential, this will stay low density residential. And then if I may, just quickly going down the line, here's one of those pockets of low density residential here. And here's another pocket of low density residential up on, I'm sorry that this keeps flickering, low density residential up on Main Street. And some other low density residential here. And then this is the general commercial area that includes the T-Mobile and the fast food places. And then this is the subway site that would change to neighborhood commercial. So does that help clarify the zoning around there for you?
Yes, some, but I'd like to go back to the Southern Mason Street part of it. When the school, do we know what the school intends to do with it?
I don't. It's going to be part of their master plan for the entire site, but it will be a part of the school, the high school facility.
Does anyone know if it's parking, buildings, like anyone else on the call? I don't remember hearing. Like, I think the school said once before, I just don't recall.
Go ahead, Ryan.
I can respond to that. It's going to be partially building. There's two or three buildings that will kind of be lined out east, north and south across the current softball fields and then extending north. And then it won't be parking, just to tell you that. There'll be some walls and there'll be a little bit of some service area in there, and those are going to be adequate separation and landscaping and a widened sidewalk for a bus drop off off of Mason Street is the plan.
Were those allowed uses under the existing zoning when they purchased it?
Yes, in any of our residential zones, the school facilities can apply for a conditional use permit.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Ann. Off to the next slide.
Let me just make sure that I haven't, sorry, let me go back. Bear with me for just a minute. I have all these things on my screen that have.
I'm glad that you're navigating it, Ann, and not me.
So another proposal we had was from one of our business owners who would like to grow their business. And not only that, we've seen in other communities a desire for craft coffee roasting, craft distilleries. Actually, there's a range of craft types of products that are becoming more and more popular. And craft coffee roasting is one of those types of uses. So the proposal would be to allow small batch coffee roasting as part of a retail use. So in other words, as part of the restaurant where coffee is served. And we would allow craft roasting in the town center. And this would be as a conditional use permit. And it would be allowed in this one area of town center. As you'll recall, town center has different districts. And this is the historic district. It was our CBD district. It's now part of town center. And I think the current craft roasting business, I believe, is right about there. So this would allow craft coffee roasting in the historic district in town center. And so other businesses could also come in. We have some regulations that we reviewed with the applicant to address potential for noise and odors. There's not a huge potential, but there is the potential for some minor noise and potentially some intermittent odors from craft coffee roasting. And since town center is going to have pretty high density residential at some point, we wanted to make sure that we had some provisions in place to make sure that odors wouldn't become a problem for residents. And the other proposal is a staff proposal to add a new innovation district overlay. And this would be added to our comprehensive plan and also to our zoning district overlays. And the idea is that we would encourage incubator businesses that might not fit into the normal type of zoning that we have here in the city. And by opening up this district, we would encourage innovative commerce and small research and development businesses, some artisanal craft businesses. Glassblowing would be one example, but you could think of other examples like maybe a small confectioner or a small specialty bakery or blacksmith that might have a light fabrication component to it. So that's the idea here. This would be a flexible overlay that a property owner could apply for, and it would be applied only in those areas that are zoned commercial or industrial. So not residential areas. Any questions on that?
And do you have coming up next, do you have a picture of what that overlay is, the area?
No, actually, good question about that. The overlay is a floating type of overlay. It would not actually be placed anywhere at this time. It would not be adopted on a geographic area, but it would rather be a floating overlay where an owner could apply, say in a commercial area, could apply to the director to have this overlay applied for one property or even a series of parcels to a geographic district. And then they would have to meet some criteria for that. And we would make sure that they met certain performance standards to avoid any noise, odors, glare, light, that kind of thing that might impact adjacent properties. But that's the idea, is that it's not mapped. It would be applied upon request.
Okay, and we got a couple of questions. First is, go ahead, Kathy, and then I'll call on Charla again.
So does this mean that the innovation district could be in 2 different areas, or is it all limited to one central area?
Oh, sure. It could be in multiple areas.
Okay, so it's just more of an allowance in the zoning of commercial. It's not just a certain spot.
Yes, that's right. And we could have, conceivably, we could have a couple of owners in different areas around the city apply to have this overlay protected, applied to their property. And we would look at protecting the surrounding neighborhood in case there are impacts that might be incompatible. But conceivably, you could have these innovation district overlays in several areas around the city.
Okay, thank you, Ann.
Go ahead, Charla.
I was wondering what were the specific zones that, so first of all, I love the idea of an innovation overlay. I was wondering what were the specific zones that we would list on that would qualify as like that would be allowed to have an innovation overlay. And also in the code, how do we make that known? Like sometimes when businesses go and look and see where they want to put something, they kind of look like if it's a floating overlay, how do we make it known when businesses are looking about where they want to locate that they would be an allowable use, or that they would be allowed if it is floating? How do
Sure. So there will not be a geographic area. So the zones where this would be allowed, if I understand your question, the first part is the zones where this would be allowed would be only commercial and industrial. So all of our range of commercial zoning, interchange commercial, general commercial, neighborhood commercial, somebody could apply to locate this innovation district in any of those commercial zones. They could also apply to locate this in any of our industrial zones, our light manufacturing and heavy manufacturing zones. I think it's most likely that we'll see this happening in commercial zones because those are more restrictive than the industrial zones. So I could see somebody wanting to locate an alternative type of business, maybe their R&D business with some light fabrication. I could see them wanting to locate that type of use in a commercial district where they're around other commercial uses and they have services there, food services and that kind of thing that their employees can use. So I would say it's probably going to be mostly in our commercial districts.
Okay, and I think Ryan raised his hand. Go ahead, Ryan.
Yeah.
I think, Councilmember Newman, I think what we would need to do, because it's not going to show up on a zoning map, right? Somebody
Right.
goes and looks at our map, they're going to have to go to our code. So I think what we're going to need to do to promote this and let people know it's an option is to have a page on our website and maybe brochures, maybe work with the Sumner Main Street Association or even the chamber to just kind of make sure this is out there, that people know this is an option. If I have some creative ideas about incubating businesses or creating an artisan studio, that they have that option in Sumner. So there's going to take a little bit of promotion for sure.
Thank you. I mean, I love the idea of getting partners to promote too. So thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Charlie. You raised a good question. It's one thing to have it. It's another thing is to get it out there so people can take advantage of it and use it as a marketing tool. So, okay. Any other questions at this point? Seeing none, go ahead, Ann.
Okay. And so we also have a number of what we call just housekeeping. These are really staff proposals. Again, we haven't had a cleanup, if you will, of our zoning code and our comprehensive plan for a while. So a lot of this is just going to be reorganizing certain code section. We're changing the old CBD now to neighborhood commercial. So there are a lot of references throughout not only our zoning code, but throughout the municipal code, like in our noise ordinance, for example. So we'll be cleaning that up, removing those references to the CBD zone. We also have an older kind of defunct zone called the mixed use development zone that isn't even mapped anywhere. So we'll be cleaning that up, removing those references. There are a number of plans and policies listed in our comprehensive plan that have dates attached to them. And so we're updating that. Some of the titles of plans are incorrect. So we'll be cleaning that up. And we have some, as we move away from the central business district zone and move to neighborhood commercial, there are some gaps that we found if we get rid of the CBD zone altogether. We lose some provisions in there that we believe were intended to apply to the town center plan. And if you'll recall on that map I showed you about craft coffee roasting, the CBD used to be in what is really the heart of the town center plan right now. So we're proposing to move some of the old CBD code sections over to town center, like the downtown parking waiver that currently exists, and also some provisions of our sign code. So we're just getting rid of all that CBD sections, those CBD sections, and transferring those to the town center. Any questions on that?
I don't have any questions, Ann. I think it's really good to remove any section of the code that has an acronym called MUD.
Okay. And then, of course, a large part of this effort is updating East Sumner neighborhood plan. We last updated this in 2015. And at that time, there was a proposal to extend 62nd Street, which I'll pull up a map here pretty quickly, but that was the 62nd Street extension that ran east-west over to Sumner Taps. And this current proposal intends to remove that 62nd Street extension. And then it also includes some zoning map changes, primarily focused on that central neighborhood. And I'm talking about the area between East Main or 60th Street East and south to 64th Street East, and west to 160th, which is the street that runs along the YMCA, and then over to Sumner Taps Highway. So in that area, we're looking at changing the zoning of the central wetlands from general commercial to a resource protection zone. And there's one area of general commercial zoning now up on 60th that we're proposing to rezone to high density residential. And then there's an area just north of 60th that we're proposing to change from low density residential to medium density residential. And let me get a map here. I don't think I can make this any larger. Is that legible to you all to see this proposed zoning? So I'll just quickly point those areas out again.
Can you zoom your screen just a little bit so it shows up wider?
I don't know that I can. I'm sorry. I think this is it.
That's okay.
I can pull up, let me see if I can pull up a different.
Why don't you go ahead and use the existing slide and see
Yeah,
if
just
we can
keep
get
going.
through that and
Yeah.
And if we need to have some clarification afterwards, you can pull up the other one in. Go ahead.
Sounds like a good plan. So this is the central neighborhood that we're referring to where we're proposing most of the zoning changes. The YMCA is about right in here. Oops, I'm sorry. The central wetlands area, this is an area of extensive wetlands and it's currently zoned neighborhood commercial. Here's the current zoning, neighborhood commercial. And we're proposing to zone that wetland area as resource protection to provide more protection for the wetlands and really just establish some certainty for the property owners out there so they actually finally know where the wetland boundary is and what areas are not likely to be developable as general commercial at those high intensities. This area is proposed for high density residential up along 60th. It mirrors the existing high density residential that's just north of that. And then between this existing high density residential area, we're proposing 2 parcels be rezoned to medium density residential. And the idea there is to provide a buffer between the high density residential development that's going to develop here and the low density residential that exists up here at the north end of the neighborhood. And these areas are actually proposed for resource protection as well. And these are city-owned parcels that are associated with Salmon Creek and various wetland restoration projects. These, by the way, I will also mention, these are also city-owned parcels at the far east end of this central area up against Sumner Taps Highway. The other part of the Sumner.
And just a second, I will call on Patrick first and then we'll go to Charlotte.
Mhm.
Thank you. Hi, Ann. Can you go back to the previous slide? I had 2 questions on this map and maybe it'll come up in, oh, no. Back to the other, there we go. The 2 questions. One is the area, the old, I call it the old Buffalo Field. Ryan responded to my email earlier as well that we had talked a few times in the past about that possibly becoming a interchange commercial. And it's been a while since I think we discussed it. I think it's been a couple of years, but it was something that had some potential upside at the time. But I'm just trying to understand how big a difference it is from the general commercial to the interchange and what the positive negative is on that section.
Mm-hmm. Sure. For context there, the Planning Commission reviewed a couple of different alternatives. One of the alternatives continued this idea, although it's zone general commercial now, the alternative 2, if you will, included this as a proposed interchange commercial. Mm-hmm. Alternative 3, which is represented by this map, maintained the current zoning as general commercial. So the Planning Commission did look at this very question about what is the appropriate zoning for this area. And the thinking was that the types of commercial uses are not that different. However, there are some commercial uses that are not, don't lend themselves to supporting the residential neighborhood and a walkable neighborhood. So to give you an idea, the general commercial zone allows just about every commercial use you can imagine in the city. The interchange commercial zone, on the other hand, would allow those same uses that are allowed in general commercial, but it would also allow some of the more regional uses like the large truck and tractor sales, heavy equipment, some of the uses that we will see out on 24th Street up north in town that are great uses to have. And we have that interchange commercial zone up there. We have interchange commercial south of 410 with the auto dealerships and the self-storage facility there. But the thinking was in this area that's in part of the East Sumner neighborhood, it would be better to have businesses that support the commercial uses and the residential uses that are going to arise in this neighborhood. No one's going to walk over to a wash and tractor type of place or a Peterbilt type of a business located here, but they might walk to other uses that would support the residential neighborhood.
Okay, so it still would promote restaurants, movie theater, all of those general things. And there's not an incentive or an easier route having it as interchange commercial versus general commercial?
I don't believe so. And I think this is what the Planning Commission's feeling was also, that we could get, some of the regional, I hate to drop names and, promote different restaurants, but we could get some of the chain restaurants in there as under general commercial. You could have car washes and gas stations, all of which would serve the immediate neighborhood. But if we leave it as, or open it up to interchange commercial, then you open it up to these other uses that are not as supportive to the local residential uses there. And Brian, you might want to add to that.
Yeah, I
Go
could.
ahead, Brian.
Thank you. Councilmember Reed, I just kind of wanted to also kind of reflect on the design guideline standards for interchange commercial, recognizing that it's a more auto-oriented type of a zone. It has less requirements for more of a pedestrian-oriented street and walkability. And since we already have interchange commercial on the south, really trying to promote the auto-oriented on the south, we felt like with the transition to a more urban village walkable style neighborhood, the Planning Commission felt general commercial would be more compatible.
Okay. No, and that's great. I really appreciate that, because I for some reason, and I honestly I'm trying to remember from 2 years ago when we were talking about the IC and what there were some advantages to having that we thought might be marketable for those sites. But to be honest with you, I can't remember them at this time. But my other question was, we received that letter earlier today by one of the folks that are directly affected by the resource protection zone. Can you guys, do we know which property that is?
Councilor Reed, I'm not aware of any letter.
Oh,
We're not in a public hearing or open public comment period, so that wouldn't be something that staff would get. It might be from an owner that staff has been talking with.
okay. Yeah, it's an email that came from a property owner. I believe it went out to council. And it's one of the folks where the back part of their property is directly impacted by the resource protection zones. I don't have it in front of me, so I don't have the name of the person, but it's one of the properties around the green, or that's being impacted by the expansion of the green.
Mm-hmm.
Patrick, I would ask the city administrator or the city attorney maybe to weigh in on this.
Mr. Mayor, I was just going to confirm that Ann, it is one of the property owners that you have been in contact with on multiple occasions and is represented by an attorney who sent in a letter. And the letter is intended to be part of next Tuesday's public hearing.
Okay.
Oh, okay. Okay. And thank you, Ms. Marcos. I stand corrected. We did get I think the public notice has gone out now for that upcoming hearing. I wasn't sure if it was today. I thought it was tomorrow, but yeah, I stand corrected. So we are now in an open public comment period. And I can address generally some of those questions, and probably what I might do is go through this overview of the documents, and then if you like, I can pull up a little better map and we can look at the aerial photos, and and we can talk more about the specific proposal for that central wetlands area.
And I'm okay to get that separately as far as just, I was just trying to visualize, since just seeing the letter today, which property that was. And my concern was, is it some, because I know the desire is to clearly outline the future use ability for those properties and to make, to clarify that. But I also wanted to see, is that something that had an adverse impact on some of those property owners that currently have it? And that's where I was leading with the question.
Sure, and I think that is from some of the comments we received from property owners who have property abutting this proposed resource protection zone. That is the concern, which I understand. The concern that it will negatively impact their ability to develop their property. And I'm sorry, it's hard to see on this map, but the thinking from staff's perspective is that those properties are really highly constrained right now. They are wetlands. They're one of our higher class wetlands, class 3 wetlands with a 60-foot buffer. So it's extremely difficult, time consuming, quite expensive to try to develop those wetlands in the back of people's properties. So our proposed zoning doesn't change where the wetlands are. It doesn't change the fact that there are wetlands there and have always been wetlands there, but we now, I think this is a benefit to property owners. We now have more certainty about where that line actually is. And I've heard from other property owners who are actually glad to have that delineation, because now for years they haven't been able to understand what is the development potential of their properties, because they didn't know where that wetland line is. So now that property owners out there have a much better understanding of that, they can market their properties. So from staff's perspective, the proposed rezone is simply marking the reality that we're seeing on the ground right now.
So that's very helpful. So it's not that we're expanding the protected areas, we're just clarifying it to the map on what already would have been a protected area. So it's not that we're not expanding it. It's just clarifying where the lines would have existed if somebody had attempted to do something with those properties anyhow.
Yes, that's a fair summary. We also heard from, I'm sorry, was there another question?
Well, no, I would just suggest is that, yeah, the council and me included, received a letter from, council representing one of the property owners, and that is part of the record for, the hearing that will be coming up next week. And so you're going to have that hearing, and then, there's going to be, obviously action after that. And I think it's appropriate, if there's any questions as a result of the hearing process, that, those issues are addressed in one way, shape, or form, prior to council action.
Mm-hmm. Sure. And if I may add, Mr. Mayor, the letters that we received regarding the proposed East Sumner neighborhood rezone are in the council's packet. And as I mentioned, there were 6 letters, and I think three of which related to the proposed rezone. So if you wanted to take a look at those public comment letters, you'll see a common theme in there about concerns of the potential impact on development potential on their properties. Another issue that was discussed with the Planning Commission was non-conforming uses. Would rezoning this area and drawing a line around the wetlands, would there be any uses in there that might become non-conforming? And in response, staff looked at that, and There are a few uses. There are some outbuildings. There's a little older home up in this area off of 60th. And so we've gone through our code and recommended some updates to our current code to ensure that we have enough non-conforming use provisions to allow people to continue their single family uses here. And also allow people, there are some provisions that allow people to expand their home up to 25%, as long as they're not expanding further into the buffer. And those are provisions that the Planning Commission supported, but shouldn't, in staff's view, drawing this line around the wetlands shouldn't, as a practical matter, have much impact on the development potential of someone's property.
And that's great. Thank you. That's definitely where I was going with my questioning is clarifying it versus expanding it. And I think that's great. Thank you.
Charlotte?
Thank you. I'll try to make this brief. So the green habitat area, and this is kind of related, but just by coincidence, where we have determined, well, where it's been determined that it's undevelopable, did we determine that, or is that because like the Corps and ecology and more like determined that it was undevelopable?
Yes, I would say that the latter. All cities are required by the State Growth Management Act. This has been in place for some time to protect wetlands and salmonid streams. And so we're required to adopt what we call critical areas regulations, which are wetlands and streams. And we've had those in place, like many other cities, since the early 1990s. Now, it is true that, and that is a state requirement. And the Department of Ecology actually sets up those rules for what we have to have in our ordinance, the best available science, how to classify wetlands in terms of their quality and value, and also what buffers are required for wetlands of certain classes. So we had a wetlands biologist. The city took the initiative in order to try to provide some incentives for redevelopment out in that area. The city took on the task of hiring a wetlands consultant to go out in 2020 and complete this wetland delineation. And so that biologist follows all of the state rules for how you test for wetlands, how you draw that line, how you categorize them, how you rate them, and so on. And so that's what this green line comes out of. It comes out of the wetland and the buffer mapping that the consultant did.
So our map is mirroring what ecology would have determined.
Yes, our map is mirroring what the biologist mapped, and they are completing that map based on what ecology requires.
Great, thank you. And then I'm sorry, and I can't read the key. So the northwest corner. Yes, exactly. So what makes that different?
That, and I'm sorry, I don't have a better map up here for you. That the key is potential lower value wetland. So this is a wetland area, but it potentially has lower value. It's a bit of an unknown because the consultant was not able to get access to actually go on this property. But the biologist knows from past work, and there are a lot of factors that go into determining whether there's a wetland or not. And wetlands don't just stop at a property line. So a biologist can stand right here on the edge of this property and they know that this is all wetlands. They were just not able to physically go on the property and determine if this was also class 3, but
Okay.
does that help? Okay.
Yep, thank you.
Mhm.
Oops, better unmute myself. Anybody else before I go back to Patrick? Cindy, go ahead.
And this is also because I can't read the key. The squiggle lines, the white squiggle lines, what is, at first I started thinking those were little creeks, but I shouldn't just assume that. What part of that, what does that mean to us?
Sure. I'm going to try to find a better map here. So the white squiggle lines are, is that a little better for counselors?
Yeah.
See? These are actually the wetland buffers. It is a little confusing. You would think that a wetland buffer would be all on the outside, but because of there are patches of this central area that are actually not wetlands, but the buffer, so that green is a wetland, and the buffer for that wetland extends all the way over here. So while there were some little hummocks throughout this area and some blackberry patches, there's some forested areas over in here on the east that didn't qualify as actual wetlands, but the wetlands right next to them have this 60-foot buffer, and so the 60-foot buffer extends across here. We wanted to reflect those buffers because it paints a better scenario for someone to try to figure out what kind of mitigation would be required out here. So dark green is wetland. These are buffers, non-wetland areas, but still required to be protected.
That
Great.
helps, Cindy?
Yes, it does. Thank you very much.
Okay, Patrick.
Thank you. Just two quick follow-ups. One, so the mineral resource protection does not cross 166, correct? It stays on the other side? Or is there
Yes.
overlap?
So when you say mineral resource protection, we don't have a zoning that is called mineral resource protection, but we have over on the actual mineral resource protection extraction area, there's low density residential and commercial zoning. But was your question maybe, does the resource protection zone cross over?
I was just curious if there was actually overlap the other direction from the mineral resource versus does that encroach on the green as well, or is that pretty much separated by the street?
I would say separated by the street. I hope I'm understanding your question. So we have
I think you are, Ann. Yeah, I think you came up with the answer. And I think Ryan was shaking his head yes when you said separated by the street.
Okay, and then my other question is kind of the same thing for my earlier question for the upper area on the Salmon Creek green, that is identifying the areas that are already in wetland or restricted type areas, and that it's not expanding that additionally out from where it was before.
That's correct. And I'll just note that this is a city parcel, fairly recently acquired. This is a city parcel, so that's why those areas are larger. But this corridor, parallel green area that you see, that's the 100-foot Salmon Creek buffer. Now down below here, because it's a 50-foot wide, we have a narrower buffer proposed in the green resource protection zone, simply because we have existing development already done in this area. But technically, no one along any of these properties can develop closer than 100 feet to Salmon Creek, and that's been in place for quite a while.
That's great. Thank you.
Thanks, Patrick. Go ahead, Ryan.
I just wanted to add a couple things in regards to the discussion. just to make it really clear, so the city went in and did the wetland study that shows the green on the map. And if we hadn't gone in there to do that, if a property owner came in to develop their property and they said, hey, I've got this 1 acre piece or 2 acre piece or whatever, we would ask the property owner, we'd require the property owner to do their own wetland study. So regardless of whether the city does the study or the property owner comes in on their own and is required to do a study, you're going to get these wetland boundaries shown on a map somehow. And so there's a perception from some of the property owners that, you know, the city kind of created this or put this on their property, when in fact it's just the way the land is. And if they were to come in with their own permit application, they would find a very similar result, and they'd have to deal with it. And so it's like, well, if we're going to develop those wetlands, what are our options? And the options are honestly pretty bleak, because for every wetland that they want to fill and dry out and build on, they have to go find 2 to 1, 4 to 1, 8 to 1. In terms of for every square foot, you've got to go find 2 square feet someplace else, or 4 or 8, depending on kind of the scenario. And that just exponentially gets incredibly expensive. So, so that's the dilemma the property owner would face just in a private application. They'd also have to be talking to the Army Corps of Engineers, the city, and the Department of Ecology to acquire the necessary permits to make all that happen. So I just wanted to make that kind of clear in terms of the property owner's options, and that the city is, as we've said a number of times, it's just showing what's on the ground with the map.
Patrick.
So, and that's very helpful. My one follow-up question to that. So if one of the property owners did have a study that showed a different boundary, then they have an opportunity to challenge or request an adjustment of our boundaries?
Yes. They can do that. The fact that the city has provided this wetlands study doesn't prevent an owner from going out and getting their own wetland study. And typically that's done at the time of development permits. And so they might be able to go to Department of Ecology and the Army Corps and make a case for a different boundary than this. So we would be open to that, but that's typically going to be part of the permitting process when they're ready to develop those remaining acres. They might be able to shift that line.
I imagine that even if there was a shift, it probably would be minimal. I doubt there, unless the ground really changed significantly, it would be pretty minor one way or the other, and it could potentially go the other direction as well, I would think.
Yes, that's true. And you'll notice that the resource protection zone line kind of splits the difference, runs through the mapped wetland buffer. So there's a little bit of flex there along those edges. What this means, say, for this property owner is if they did their own study and found that the wetland buffer is really up in here, that would be okay, but it's likely going to be pretty close to right there. And even though the resource protection zone line is up here, it doesn't mean, on the other hand, that this property owner can come in and fill this buffer. So there's an area around this boundary that's a little bit flexible, but still would have to be protected if it is actually wetlands.
That's great. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Patrick. Go ahead, Ann.
Okay. So the other part of our East Sumner Neighborhood Plan update are some policy updates, and this is a map from the East Sumner Neighborhood Plan showing potential circulation routes. And the idea is that we want to support a walkable neighborhood. So the circulation map is intended to show a number of different types of potential corridors. We have policies that we're proposing that support multi-use circulation corridors. So that would be bicycle and pedestrian paths throughout the neighborhood at some of these mid-block connections. And then it also means that when we build streets out there, we need to look at having a street cross-section that accommodates pedestrians and street trees and perhaps some bicycle lanes on the major streets. And then, as I mentioned, if this becomes a resource protection zone, we're proposing some updates to those resource protection regulations. There are some uses currently in resource protection that may not be compatible with a wetlands natural area here, such as outdoor sports arenas and kennels and that kind of thing. So we propose some updates to those regulations as well. And then in our zoning code, the East Sumner Neighborhood Plan has several sections of regulations talking about how high you can build a building, what the setbacks are, and so on. And that's in need of some housekeeping rather, and some reorganization. So that's another part of what we're proposing for the East Sumner Neighborhood Plan. And then all of this comes back to you in an ordinance that adopts all of these proposals. And because of the work that we're doing in the East Sumner neighborhood and trying to make some adjustments for non-conforming uses and buffers and so on, we're updating our critical areas or our wetlands regulations. And some of the regulations that we're proposing are really, again, in response to Planning Commission concerns about non-conforming uses. These proposed regulations are really trying to address what's out there right now and not making any of those uses non-conforming, ensuring that they can still expand to the 25% limit that they are currently allowed. And so those are some, staff considers those minor housekeeping updates and some improvements to our definitions, just clarifying things that make it easier for property owners and developers to understand. And then that'll be a separate ordinance coming back to you with those specific code changes as well. Any questions on this?
Don't see any hands raised, Ann. Doing a good job. Thank you.
And this is in the East Sumner Neighborhood Plan wetlands study. These are the mapped wetlands that the biologist mapped, and then this yellow line represents the buffer. So this pretty much mirrors what we have shown in the green resource protection zone. So we can talk about this map further at some point if you would like to as well. The other component of our East Sumner Neighborhood Plan update is to update what we call the East Sumner Planned Action Ordinance. This is it's a special type of SEPA environmental review, and it's a process that's actually established in state regulations, laid out in detail how you go about establishing one of these planned action ordinances. We have an ordinance already that we adopted in 2015, and we're updating that with some new threshold numbers. The idea behind the planned action ordinance is that if a project comes in and meets certain criteria that have already been evaluated in the environmental impact statement, they may qualify for a streamlined environmental review. And in the planned action ordinance, there are certain thresholds in there, such as how many housing units you can have, how many job employment units you can have, how many PM peak hour traffic trips you can have. And if a project meets those thresholds, then they would qualify for this streamlined environmental review. And the beauty of that is it really saves an applicant a lot of time and costs in their developing stage when they're trying to get permits or they're trying to do studies. And staff use it as an incentive for developers to come into the area. It really helps them during the permitting process. But the idea, again, is that we have evaluated all the potential impacts in the environmental impact statement early on, which we're doing now. And so that later, 2 years, 3 years from now, when a project comes in and they meet all those thresholds, they don't have to go back through this same review. Ryan, is there anything you wanted to add on the planned action ordinance? Any questions on that?
Don't see. I'm still checking here. Don't see any yet. Go ahead.
And I hope you've all had a chance to read the 385-page draft environmental impact statement by this evening. So that is a big part of this process. The environmental impact statement evaluates all of the proposals that we've just been talking about. It evaluates what's being proposed in the East Sumner Neighborhood Plan. It evaluated all of the potential regulations updates that we have and the policy updates. And then looking at that lay of the land of this complex proposal, the EIS analyzes a range of impacts. So it looks at potential impacts of all of these various rezones, et cetera, on potential housing impacts, traffic impacts, et cetera. And then it looks at mitigation measures. Do we have plans and policies and regulations in place that will mitigate any of these potential impacts from these proposed rezones and proposed regulations? And so out of all of that huge volume of words in the EIS, the conclusion at the end of the EIS is that with these proposals, there's really no significant adverse impacts to it. The other thing that the EIS contains that's important for us in the planning process is that, as I mentioned, the EIS analyzes all the potential impacts of the East Sumner Neighborhood Plan. So the rezoning that you were seeing on the maps, the EIS evaluated all of that and looked at the potential numbers of increases in jobs or decreases, potential increases in housing units. What happens if you go from general commercial zoning to this pocket of high density residential zoning? What does that do to our overall number of housing units? And then, of course, how does that impact traffic? And the EIS looked at all those, and through that, it established the thresholds for the East Sumner Planned Action Ordinance, which will set the thresholds for future East Sumner development projects. And just a word about, process on the EIS. So we issued a draft environmental impact statement, and that runs for a 30-day comment period. And we actually didn't, I think we received a couple of comments, but they were related to the same comments that we had already. So we didn't, I'm sorry that keeps happening. Then we'll issue a final environmental impact statement, and this will just be just before the city council adopts this complete package. And in the final EIS, we will evaluate all of the public comments that we received from the property owners, from agencies, and we'll include all of those in the EIS, and we'll have a response to those. So you'll have a chance to see our city official response in the final EIS. Any questions there?
Don't see any hands raised or anything, Ann. Go ahead.
The package will be adopted after all of this discussion with all the memos and the maps. The council will actually adopt this whole 2020 comprehensive plan update via just 4 ordinances. And these will be coming back to you, but they're just real quickly, there will be a critical areas or wetlands ordinance. We'll have an East Sumner planned action ordinance with all of those thresholds in it that I mentioned. There will be a zoning ordinance where we'll have all of the housekeeping updates, the zoning map updates, the proposed rezones from property owners. And then we'll also have a citywide comprehensive plan ordinance that will adopt the East Sumner neighborhood plan, the comprehensive plan, and also the environmental impact statement. We'll bring those back to you. That will be in your packet for the hearing on February 16th. We'll have those ordinances for you so you can take a look. And that's what you'll actually be acting on then on the 16th, or excuse me, in March, when we get to the final adoption date. And the next steps, council public hearing February 16th. We, as I was reminded tonight, we did already get the public hearing notice out for that. And then we'll have a decision adoption tentatively set for March 15th. And that's it. Any questions or follow-up?
Council members, questions, follow-up. Go ahead, Charlotte.
I just wonder if you can go back to the last slide, so the public hearing, the dates for the public hearing.
Oh, okay.
One more before that. Yeah. Oh, okay. Sorry. I missed the adoption date. Okay. Thank you. That's it.
Sure.
Okay, anybody else? Whoa, Josh.
Yeah, I just wanted to say Ann represented the Planning Commission thoughts very well, and the council asked all some really good questions because they were a lot of the same questions that we asked for the last few months as well.
Thanks, Josh. Appreciate that confirmation, and a heck of a lot of work that went into it from both staff and the Planning Commission. Anybody else? Any members of council? Okay. Wow. And that was only an hour and 20 minutes with Q&A. And that was one heck of a lot of information to cover. Congratulations. Well done. Well done. Oops, I had to move this over to the big screen so I could see it. So now I'll put it over here on the smaller screen. Okay. That moves us out of regular business to the city administrator's report. Mr. Wilson.
I have nothing tonight, Mayor. Thank you.
Well, dang, you're a hero tonight, Mr. Wilson. Okay. Agenda setting, any calendaring issues in terms of either city council meetings or your committee meetings? Anybody have any issues, any problems? Go ahead, Councilmember Hochstetter. Cindy.
Yes, my question is does both Josh and I need to attend the first CD committee meeting, or does he attend it just to vote? There's a change on who's going to be the committee member. So maybe the question is for Jason.
He unmuted himself, so I think he wants to say something.
No, Councilmember Hochstetter, you don't need to be there because there'll be a majority of the committee that can make that vote.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Go ahead, Ryan.
I just wanted to clarify that we are planning on moving the CD committee date for February from the 24th to the 23rd at the same time at 5 o'clock. And I want to just confirm that that's an okay date for everybody who's on the committee. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. That's the case. We'll move on to executive session, in which we do not have an executive session. I know you're all vastly disappointed unless the city attorney wants to put us in. Okay, good. You had me worried there, Andrea.
Back on to confirm that we do not have one tonight.
Okay. If we did, I hoped I would have known about it, and I assumed I would have. So, okay. So we don't have anything there. And I note, Mr. Wilson and Mr. Windish, is that there were some Q&As. And I responded back to the Q&A, say part of our rules don't allow for exchange with the public during the study sessions, but the staff would get back to the individual, with answers to the questions that they have. So just for the record, make sure you follow up on those Q&A. That being the case, this meeting is adjourned at 7:26. Thanks again, staff. Everyone be safe and have a nice rest of the evening.